Hey, everybody. This is Jordan McConnell with the Crohn's Veteran Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am honored and grateful to have a very special guest, Ariel Jordan, with me today, hailing from Michigan. How are you doing today, Ariel?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing great, and and again, thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me, and I know our audience is going to get a lot from me listening to your story today. So first off, um, who is Ariel Jordan, but without besides having an awesome last name?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me and talking to me today. So I am originally from Rochester Hills, Michigan, currently living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I am a resident, internal medicine resident at the University of Michigan in my second year now. So um,
Very
excited to be
awesome.
doing that. Yeah, and I'm an ulcerative colitis patient. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in October of 2015, just before Halloween. I was a college student at Michigan State at the time. So go Spartans, go green.
Right.
And I very much remember that time when that happened in my life. Like um, was going about, being a busy pre-med college student and was, for the last like 6 months or so, I've been having like bloody stools and pain and wasn't really sure why and was telling my mom about it and she was like, well, it's got to be like the food you're eating at college. It's that dorm food. So
Right.
she was like, stop eating the dorm food, we'll make some food at home and we'll have you eat that. And we were trying to do that. And she was like, well, maybe something I made was bad. And so we kept thinking it was the food. And but things were just not getting any better. And I was starting to get so sick, it was hard to get back and forth to class. And so finally my mom said, this has been going on a while. Let's have you go to the doctor's office. So I was still seeing my
Yeah.
pediatrician at the time. And I saw her about it. And actually it's funny because I had had this issue before in the past. I'd had bloody stools even as a kid. And I went to my pediatrician, it was a different pediatrician at the practice at the time. He had since retired when I'm in college. But I remember my mom telling him about this and he was like, well, she's probably just constipated, you need fiber,
Right.
and I'm sure it'll get better. And it really wasn't and didn't. And but eventually, I did have a period when I got to maybe about 10 or 11 that the bleeding stopped. And so we just assumed maybe he was right, or I don't know. And so then like I said, it all started happening again when I was in college. And so I saw my new pediatrician about it. And she was, we were telling her about my symptoms and she said, I'm concerned that you need to see a specialist about this. I think you need to see a gastroenterologist. And so um, that's how I ended up going to see a gastroenterologist. And so we said, okay, we'll go do that. And she pretty quickly after listening to my symptoms, was able to say, I'm concerned that you have this condition, inflammatory bowel disease. And so my mom and I are like, what is that? We don't know what that
Right.
is. And so I went through the colonoscopy process, which is, not pleasant as a college student. And we were finally able to get answers. She said, it looks like she has this condition, inflammatory bowel disease. It looks like she probably has ulcerative colitis. And so, this was the first time I was hearing these words. So we were, wondering what this means and what are we supposed to do here? And so they remember them giving me a sheet with different foods I can eat, and the nurse saying, you get to eat all the good stuff. You get to eat, she was saying Wonder Bread and some other stuff she was saying. She was like, you get to eat like all the stuff that, we tell people not to eat. And I was like, oh, okay. But, you know, so I was
You know
trying to
that.
learn like what that means in terms of my diet.
I,
And
I'm still trying to
go
figure
ahead.
that out.
Yeah, it's interesting like that, I don't have that sheet anymore, but I remember reading it and thinking, she was like, you get all to eat all the stuff that they usually tell people not to eat. That stuff is good for your condition. I was like, oh, okay. So you know, she was like, you might want to not eat as much fiber. And, because I was like, well, I eat oatmeal. And she was like, maybe don't do that. And I was like, oh, okay. And the vegetables and stuff I was eating. And so I don't know, it was, definitely going to be a big life change and trying to figure that out, especially as someone living in the dorms at college. And so um, from there, um, I still ended up needing to continue to see my pediatrician, because even if after I got on medication, I was still having symptoms for a while, still not feeling well. And we also found out that I guess from me bleeding for so long, I had gotten anemic, and my
Oh,
blood
wow.
pressure was super low. So that was part of also contributing to why I was feeling so unwell. And so I remember her putting me on salt tablets, actually, because I wasn't getting enough salt in my diet. She was saying to maintain my blood pressure. So she was like, the salty fries we tell people not to eat, you can eat those. And like,
Oh,
I guess
wow.
like, because I don't, I wasn't eating a lot of fast food or really any of that stuff. And
Hmm.
so, that's why she ended up putting me on the salt tablets, which is interesting to be eating, specifically giving yourself salt. It's just an
Yeah,
interesting idea.
that's a little bit new for me too. And like the I mean, so I have Crohn's disease, so different, different experience completely. But I remember like that and I was eating, like buying bananas and stuff, and like people do for the house and stuff. And so and I remember we got like fruit flies or something, like, which also happens with bananas. And and so for maybe like 2 weeks there was no bananas, right? And then I go to the GI doctor, they're like, oh man, vitamin D, your potassium's low, all these things. And so because of that, the vitamins I was getting from the bananas were like out of my system. Like I just started getting like monthly shots, just like that. And
Oh, wow.
so, mhm. But please continue.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. I feel like it ends up being, you don't realize how easily you start, you can lose blood and vitamins and things. And so yeah, so had to do those things for a while to try to get stronger and kind of get back to a better place in life. Eventually, like after a few months, the medication started to work, and so I stopped bleeding, which was
Mhm.
good, and I was able to kind of get back to school. And I think that the hardest part, like I said, became trying to figure out my diet and what I was going to eat, and figuring out the trigger foods, which I think a lot of us with IBD struggle with, is figuring out like, I can't eat this, like this is going to make me feel bad. And I feel like I'm still learning those things, even though I've had
Mhm.
the disease now um, for over 5 years, still trying to learn
Mhm.
learn what things I can't eat and can't eat.
I mean, so how, because again, this is something that I'm still working on too. And so like, so just in your own personal experience, how do you track that? Or how are you, what's your approach to figuring out what works for you and what doesn't? Or do you have one?
Yeah, I feel like it ultimately ends up being a lot of trial and error. And I remember
Mm.
my doctor telling me it was going to be that way when I
Mm.
got diagnosed, when she gave me that sheet, and she was like, this is just kind of a sheet that we give everybody, but this is not going to necessarily work for you, or this doesn't work for everybody. It's going to be you figuring out what's going to work for you. And so I feel like a lot of it ends up being trial and error, and me figuring out, what's going to work and what isn't. I think, I don't know if, and I'm still not sure if it's related, but I feel like I realized that I was probably lactose intolerant, or have some sort of milk
Mm.
allergy to go along with it, because I realized that, I feel terrible when I have dairy. So like
Yeah.
I cut that out. And then for a long time, I wasn't able to eat a lot of leafy green vegetables, which was unfortunate, because I liked a lot of those, because they were causing me a lot of, cramping, and they were causing some bleeding if I was eating too much of it.
Mm.
And so then, um, but as time has gone on, I've noticed that I've tried reintroducing foods, and that's something I've been able to do. And that's something actually my aunt told me. I found out actually after I got diagnosed that my aunt also had ulcerative colitis.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, and she hadn't told anybody, because she didn't know anybody else who related to that. And so it was really, I think that was really great to, at least know one other person who had this
That's
disease.
been definitely, I would agree. I mean, that's, it's kind of not a fun thing to have in common, but but at least you have somebody in your family, some solidarity, somebody knowing your struggle, inside the family. That's very valuable.
Yeah, and so she actually was on the same medicine I was on, so she was able to kind of talk to me about it. And she was the one who said, it's a lot of trial and error with the foods. I was the same way with the oatmeal, and now I can eat oatmeal again. And so she was like, you can always give it a little bit of time, and retry it at some point when your disease is better controlled. And so yeah, I've been trying over time just to figure out, what worked for me. She gives me different recipes, which I think has been nice too, like of things that she's found that that work really well for her. And like, she's a huge fan of like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, and so she tells me different things that she's like, this, I've tried this and this seems to work well. So it's been nice, like at least knowing one other person who has the disease too. And yeah, in addition to that, like so I that my doctor at the time, she told me about the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation because I'm like, where do I get more information about this? And so I ended up, going to their walk, which I think was nice, just because I got to
Mm,
at least meet some other people, who also have the disease. And I think that was just nice, just seeing like a lot of other people with this, just to know that like I'm not alone. Because I think, especially in college, I didn't know anybody else, like I said, really with this besides my aunt who
mhm.
lived out of state. And so, it can feel very isolating to be dealing with this. And especially if you don't really have, my parents didn't know anything about this, they're not medical people. And so we're all just kind of struggling and trying to figure this out. And so, I think it was really difficult to navigate. So at least like seeing that there are other people who had this disease, I think was really nice. Um, and I did okay for a while. And then I went to I graduated college and I was doing okay on the medication I was on, and then I graduated and I moved to Georgia to go to medical school. And
Okay.
unfortunately, about a month after I was there, I went to the pharmacy like I normally do to go pick up my medicine, and they told me it was going to be $1,000 for my medication. And so I was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a student. I can't afford this. Like, what am I supposed to do? And they said, why is this? And I said, why is this happening? And they said, well, your insurance isn't, doesn't want to, is not covering this medication anymore. You need to call them. So I went home and, I told them I'm gonna have to come back. I can't afford this. So I went home, I called my insurance, and they were like, yeah, I mean, we have some other meds that we think, we like you to try, that should be similar to your medication. And they'll be, I guess they were cheaper for the insurance company. And I was like, well, I've been
Right.
on this med now for, a couple years. And I've been doing okay on it, and I really don't want to do that. And they're like, well, we're not going to cover it unless you do this. And so I was like, okay, I
That's
guess I'm going to
terrible.
have to try. It was pretty terrible. So I switched to one of the meds that they said that I had to try, and it went really poorly. I ended up, being back in the same place that I was in when I started this journey, like I was to just telling you about when I was at Michigan State. Like I reverted right back there within the span of, maybe 3 or 4 days. It was,
Oh my God.
just as soon as I feel like as soon as my original medication was out of my system, it's like I wasn't taking medication anymore. It's like I just stopped doing anything for my disease. And so I was struggling, and then once again couldn't make it to school. And it was becoming, it was terrible. And so then, my mom came down to try to help take care of me because I was, not really able to do anything. I was struggling again. And we called the insurance company and told them this is not working. I'm flaring. I'm back to square one with my disease. And so they said, okay, well, we'll cover your medication again. Thanks for giving that a try. So they recovered my med. And then, a couple of months later, they did the same thing where they were like, hey, we're gonna, we need you to. And I told them I've been through this already. I already failed this. And they were like, well, this is a different med. It should be just like your med. And I'm like, I really don't want to do that. Like I've already been through this already, and I already struggle with this. So I don't want to go through that again. And I'm concerned my disease is getting worse. And so um, they were like, yeah, I mean, we're not going to pay unless you try this. And so, I was like, I'm not going to do this. So then I started trying to ration my medication, trying to just go and, get a little bit at a time. And that was going really poorly, because, I can't afford the full, you know, 30-day supply or whatever. That's going to be $1,000. So I'm trying to, get, let me get maybe however so many days I can get, maybe I can
It's
afford
a,
this much. And
it's
then,
ridiculous. It's like, it's like buying, like single cigarettes or something back in the, like, is
yeah,
this, the whole, I mean, I'm listening to, I'm very sorry that happened. And so, and that, my, 'cause my medicine that I take, the cholesterol, like it's just, it's and for me, it's like, yeah, if I miss two doses of that, like in succession, it's like I've never taken it once,
Yeah,
and so I know, yeah, so folks out there listening, for people with Crohn's and colitis, these medications, have a significant impact on quality of life, you know.
absolutely. They're so important. And yeah, like I said, it's like I was back to square one. And so I told him I don't want to do this again. Like I'd rather, but I was still doing poorly because obviously I'm not getting the full dose of medication I need because I'm trying to ration it out. So it was, that was going bad. And I felt like I was doing worse and, starting to have pain, joint pains and pains I never had before. And my doctor's like, yeah, I think your disease is worsening, and I'm like, why, I need to get back on a treatment. And so finally working, she's calling in too, and they're not listening to her. And so finally she called, she says, I think we can try this. Let's see if your insurance will pay for it. And so she got me a different medication. And they were willing to pay for that. And so I tried that, and luckily that one worked. But I have been struggling at that point for, a good 5, 6 months. And so like, so then from that point on, I've done okay on this medicine. And so far my insurance has been willing to pay, but, I, unfortunately that pain has still, I still have that pain. It didn't go
Mm,
away, and it just, and it's, and I feel from some frustration from that because I feel like that didn't have to happen if they would have, just covered the medication I was on and I didn't have to go through this. So, and especially as a student, it's just, and you're trying to go about your life, you're trying to study and you're trying to, move along and get your degree and everything. It's, how it's so awful and challenging.
definitely, it really is, and like I mean, it makes you think about our healthcare system versus other healthcare systems in the world and stuff, and and other places in the world, this kind of thing, this standard care is just not that big of a deal. Like, I'm over here in Las Vegas, and I think I mentioned to you, like I've even, yeah, my insurance company just tried to work with them to find a GI doctor here in Las Vegas. Yeah, they provided it, but as far as getting those, this that list was almost just a list of doctors that these people might help you, and so and that fizzled out into nothing. And so just so fortunately I had great care before I moved here, and so and the medications I take from that still help, but it's a struggle, Ariel. So um and so how so you're your second year of residency now, and so so what's your life looking like today?
Today it's pretty good. I like I said, my medication has the one that she, was able to get approved for me and to get them to pay for it. That one has for the most part kept things in control. I might have a flare, a couple times a year, but it's nowhere near where I was, as I think back on that time where I'm like was basically not getting out of a flare. And
Mm.
so and I a lot of what I do now is trying to help other people, and I do a lot of advocacy for bills. Like there's a bill right now, a federal bill, the Safe Step Act that they're trying to get passed, and it's related to this prior auth thing and the insurance and this idea that the insurance companies have so much control and that you have to do this fail first approach of failing, you know their selected medications before getting coverage for the medications that your doctor asked for, and that's not the way it should be. Like those choices should be
Uh,
in the hands of patients and providers. Like that shouldn't be the insurance company decide that. Like they don't know me, they don't know my history. How can they tell me, we've decided that this should be good enough for you? They don't know anything about me. And so fighting for that.
literally, and you're a walking, truth of that, and that, you guys may think you know what you're doing, but you have no idea, in this case, it would be a lot more helpful if you're listening to my medical providers, you know.
Yeah,
And so, and
exactly.
yeah, and so like, and I, yeah, anything I can do, way over here to help, to support that, in Michigan, let me know, because it's ridiculous, that experience, and the experience that people have, kind of pulling teeth to get care that they're already paying for. It needs a lot of help and change, to make it a lot more helpful.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's a federal bill right now, so they're trying to pass it. If it passes, it would help everyone
oh yeah,
nationwide. And so,
right,
yeah, so if everybody can just talk to their representative in their state
exactly.
about to support this bill, because I mean it'll help us all of us with IBDs, because I feel like all of us end up being in a place where we might experience this, and no one should have to go through go through this. And I'm sure there are people who have even worse stories, but it's just these are things that don't have to happen.
100%, 100%. Um, and so what, so I can kind of, guess why that you became a GI doctor or that you want to be a GI doctor. But is there any, what do you, hope to accomplish? Like, is there any, like maybe anything, in particular, in the science or, or in that area that, fascinates you, interests you that you want to pursue?
Yeah, so I coming into medical school, I actually didn't know I wanted to do to do GI. I actually, I thought I wanted to actually be a pediatrician. And so, but when I, was on my internal medicine rotation, which is kind of what the stepping stone to becoming a GI doctor, as a medical student, I actually cared for a lot of IBD patients, and a lot of, and so that was a great experience, seeing people similar to myself and getting to help them. And one thing that kept coming up that I for a lot of them was, a lot of them were complaining about public access to bathrooms, which I knew that there was a law in Michigan for that, because I remember my GI doctor telling me that when I got diagnosed, that was one of the things that she told me was, if you are are in a situation where you're out in public and you need to use a bathroom, and there's not a general open bathroom available, but there's an employee only bathroom on the premises, you as an IBD patient can have access to that. So I remember her telling me that, so I didn't run into that. But I thought that was something that existed everywhere, but I found out in Georgia they didn't have that. And they actually, that's not a law that exists in every state. Is this Restroom Access Act law. And so a lot of patients were complaining about that they have been situations where they were soiling themselves out in public, or scared to go out, because this was pre-pandemic, but scared to go out because they were afraid of, what if I'm flaring and there's nowhere for me to go to the bathroom? They're not going to, they're not going to let me use the bathroom. And so he said, when I looked into that, that's when I realized that law didn't exist everywhere. So that's actually how I got into doing, this advocacy type work. Is I actually did some research on it. I made a survey, and I sent it to, we called a bunch of patients with some of my classmates, and we talked to people, IBD patients at our hospital about, what, if they were, about their experiences. And we were finding over and over again that people have run into this, that they were out in public, or they didn't go out anymore, and they were basically suffering in silence at home, and really isolated, because they had so much fear about not being able to go to the bathroom somewhere. And so I took all of that, and I took that because I didn't know where else to go. I took that to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I told them, hey, this I know this is happening. This is something that's happening. What can we, can we get this law passed in Georgia? This is something that other states have. Why don't we not have this here? So there was another IBD patient advocate. She's a Crohn's patient, and she was wanting to work on this as well. So she and I were able to team up, and we actually got the bill drafted for the first time in Georgia. She knew her,
Wow,
um,
that's really cool.
yeah, she knew her representative pretty well, and so we were able to convince him, to take this on, and make a bill that would be similar to the bills that already exist in other states, like here in Michigan. And I learned a lot about. I didn't know anything about advocacy. I don't, I'm not a super political person, and so,
Mm,
it's been a process that I've had to just, I learned a lot about, just kind of on the fly, of lobbying and trying to get people to sign on to your bill, and what this process looks like in terms of trying to keep the bill moving. And so, and when I look back on it, the moment that I knew what I wanted to do with my career was when we got a hearing for our bill in front of the Georgia House. And so we were at the Georgia Capitol, in the House, in a room, and there were representatives for this particular committee. Unfortunately, it was a Judiciary Committee. We didn't get up in front of the Health Committee. I'm not really sure why,
mm.
but that was where the bill got sent to. And so we were trying to convince them, basically, that this bill is important for patients in Georgia. We need to have it move on. And so I'd actually called some of the patients from my survey and asked them, like, hey, I appreciate you telling my story. Do you want to come down here? We're trying to get this passed here. Do you want to come too so that we can talk about this? And it was that moment of, standing next to them and the people who came and them telling their stories and trying to convince their representatives, this is important to me. I'm suffering. I need you to help me, by passing this bill so I don't have to go through this anymore and I can live a better quality of life. It was really that moment when I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is like what I want to be doing with my career. I want to be, a doctor who, is a doctor for my patients. Like I'm a part of this community myself, and I want to be out there with my patients on the front lines with them, fighting for what's important to them. Things like, access to bathrooms, and the issues with these prior authorizations and not being able to afford your medications. Like, these are the things that affect our quality of life. And so I want to be that person that's out there with them, figuring out what can we do, in addition to helping them with their treatment, with the options that we have in terms of medications, but also, what can we do to make life better for all of us.
100%, and much respect for for all your efforts. And so yeah, so also in that vein of advocacy, like or not even advocacy, like maybe like just more like just trying to improve the lives of people with IBD. Maybe that's more the thread I'm looking at. Like, and so I'm really I'm really kind of interested in in self-help, like, and so so I have what are some to anybody listening out there, is there anything, any tips or tricks or things that you found, that have, that has improved, your well-being?
Yeah, I think, for myself, things that I've done is trying to, do things that help with my mental health. So I think, because I think having this disease in itself can be, stressful, knowing it's chronic, and, not every day is a great day. Like, sometimes you're just sitting on the toilet and you're like, oh my gosh, like it's one of those days. Like I remember that yesterday, that I was having one of those days yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, people just have no idea. And so, it and just I think, trying to just keep faith and keep hope, keep hopeful, and keep in mind that some days are like this, but they're going to be better. There are going to be good days coming forward. So I think a lot. So one thing I do is I do mindfulness meditation. So I started doing that. So I think that's one thing that I've personally found helpful. I've tried to get out and walk. I found that the exercise helps with my pain and helps with my joints. And so like I think definitely those things, just trying to kind of do whatever you can to try to keep, like I said, keep faith and keep hopeful. And I think one thing that I've personally found that make I think it's part of the reason I do it too, is just because it gives me a sense of like empowerment, and that I'm out doing something for myself as well as for other people, is the things that I'm talking about in terms of trying to help get things passed, and trying to help educate, and just getting out and educating people about our disease. Because I'm learning that there are so many people out here who don't know much about it. And I can see that, because I think about where I started as a college student. I didn't know anything about this when I first heard the word inflammatory bowel disease. I'm like, what is that? That's not a real thing.
Right.
And so just trying to get more people to understand. And I've realized a lot of people, once you explain it to them, they're like, either like, hey, I know somebody with that actually, or they're like, that's I want to they are interested in learning more about it. And once you tell them about it, they hear your story, a lot of times people are more, just generally more understanding. And so I think just being able to do that too, I notice has been helpful. And I think having a community of other people that are like you, or have your disease, I've been able to find that in a few ways. One, through, like I said, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They just kind of help connect me with some other people that that had the disease too, which I think is nice, because it's nice to know other people. My aunt is, like, as I said. And then I actually made a friend in medical school who who I found out has ulcerative colitis as well. She's now one of my best friends. And I think,
Wow, that's great.
yeah. And I think, like,
Mm.
I think she made a big impact on me as well, and made me, I think, feel, I think for a long time I was kind of almost ashamed of my IBD, but I think I came to a place of feeling more like, no, this is who I am. And I think I took on more of this persona that I am now from her, just because she's such a, I think of her as such a wonderful chronic disease warrior. And also, when she started, she was trying to figure out how to navigate, disability, and accommodations and different things, and I actually went through that process myself in my school, because they actually were saying that they hadn't had anyone like me before who had IBD, so they didn't know what accommodations I needed. They didn't know if they could do anything for me. And so I had already fought that battle. And I thought
Hmm.
about it as, I was able to help pave the way for her, help her navigate how to, how to get what you need to be able to also get through school. And so I think, just being able to be there for other people, and they're able to being able to be there for you, having that community, I think makes a huge difference too.
100%, 100%. Yeah, for me, it's talk. Of course, this podcast itself, right? Is a big mental health thing for me. Just talking to people and listening, listening to people's journeys is a very therapeutic. And so, but yeah, and of course, my wife, my son, we got a dog last year. Those kind of things are really helpful. Like, I said, my mom, a huge, huge, huge. Um, influence on my life. And I'm a twin. I have a twin brother, and
Oh,
so
cool.
yeah, and so he so I'm Jordan, he's Morgan. So and so shout out Morgan. So yeah, so he's kind of been down since day one type of dude. And so it's so those kind of connections are so vital, for people that with IBD. And yeah, it's definitely needed. And so uh before we get out of here, Ariel, so I know your advocacy stuff, like, is there any projects or anything personal or any professional, anything that you want to, this is kind of your time to shine, maybe a little bit of a platform to kind of to kind of speak on something that's important to you, or that you want to share, even if it's fun, right? Just something fun you want to share with the audience that that can either help the IBD community at large, or yourself, or both.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is, and this, like I said, has been a huge learning process for me, is have, not, not being ashamed of your disease, and knowing that, they're going to be hard days, but they're going to be good days as well. And just knowing that, there are a lot of other people out there like you, that, and, they want to be supportive of you. They, they're, we're a tight knit community, I guess. And so and as I'm learning, and as I've, come to be a part of. And so I think, not being afraid to say, hey, I have Crohn's, I have ulcerative colitis. And, I think kind of just that first step of, kind of self-awareness, and just, like I said, coming to a place of, of acceptance. And, like I said, knowing that you're not alone out here. I think that's one big thing. And then, so that's one thing I want to say. I think the other part of it too is, like I said, um, you know, there, there are a lot of us out here who are trying to do this kind of work. I think, there are a lot, and I think there are a lot more people who want to probably get involved. And, and like I said, I started just as a student, who didn't know anything about, I'm still learning a lot about the process of how things work, and how bills get passed, and how you make change, and, out here. But, you know, there are a lot of us out here trying to make a difference. And I want other people to know that they can make a difference too. Whether, even if it's just, finding out who is my local, legislator, and reaching out to them and telling them, hey, I'm a patient that has, Crohn's, or I have ulcerative colitis, and, I want, I want to, there are these bills here. The Safe Step Act is one of them right now. Like I said, that's a big one. And, you know, they may, if you have a personal story, just telling them that, or even if you don't, just knowing, I know a lot of people like me who have run into this issue of not being able to afford their medications, or having to be on a medication that's not right for them. And, and they've gotten sick from that, and that's not right. And I wouldn't want something like that to happen to me, and just being able, and telling their local legislators. And I think that's something that I had never talked, spoken to a, a politician before, and I think, it's amazing. It's been amazing to me how truly receptive they are to what you have to say. They want to hear your story, like, especially if you are someone who's voting for them and you are someone who is a part of, a constituent of their community. They want to hear from you. You're the one who, who makes, who, kind of makes or breaks things. So they do want to hear what, what's
Mhm.
important to you. And so these are the things that are important, these are these things that are important to you, getting out there and telling them. And I think, that's kind of one place that you can definitely start it for people who, are wondering how can I go out and make a difference out there, that just, your voice is one, your voice is important too. I think that's one thing is, I think a lot of us feel like, well, I don't know if my story is important, or I don't know if what I have to say is important. Like, no, like that makes, your voice just makes all of our voices louder.
For real, for real, for real. I mean, that's why I do, that's why I do it. Again, that's why this show is important to me. That's why I do it, because, I want, everybody's, story matters. Everybody, experience has value, and, and all these different perspectives and everything, can, provide insight to, to people listening. And so, so yeah, so you know, I always want to talk to people with IBD, because because I'm just curious on how everybody's doing it, really. Like I just want to know, like, how Ariel Jordan getting through her day. That's because she's doing all these amazing things. And so, and I want, people out there to know that you're doing these amazing things, and and that you're still, you know, facing these challenges. And then, it's a balance, and and to, be kind to yourself. And
Yeah, be
so,
kind to yourself, and know it's okay to have to take the elevator and not be it's and not take the stairs. Like, it's okay to have to do that.
for real,
It's, yeah, it's okay. I think that's, like I said, a big part of it is just knowing that, you know maybe things are, look a little different for me, but that, that isn't, that's not going to stop me. I'm still going to get there like everyone else.
awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I am so grateful that we were able to connect. I'm grateful that you're able to, share, share your story. To everyone listening, if you found, if you found value, and Miss Ariel Jordan's story, please subscribe to the Crohn's Veteran Podcast. Share this episode far and wide, to people with IBD, or people impacted by IBD all over the place. You can check out the website. It's crohnsveteran.com, where you can see, this episode when it's published, and, and other previous episodes and other things that I'm doing. You can contact me for, for interview stuff, helping me make Crohn's Veteran better, all those kind of fun things. I can be emailed at jordan@crohnsveteran.com. You can check out the merch store, where Ariel, and other, ulcerative colitis, folks out there can get really awesome, merch and everything, to wear, to kind of, feel proud that, that you're a little more awesome than everybody else, because you have ulcerative colitis, and you're, kicking butt every day. And so, check that out. There's Crohn's, there's colitis merch, crohnsveteranstore.com. We're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, all of them. So, again, I'm super I'm super happy we're able to do this. Thank you for all you do, Ariel, and, and I hope that, the rest of your schooling goes very smooth.
Thank you. And I appreciate, thank you so much for having me and for letting me share my story, and hopefully, inspire maybe some other people out there who are wondering if they can make it. And hopefully from hearing this, they'll know that, there's going to be bumps in the road, but you can still make it.
100%, 100%. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.